Hello and welcome to the Local Candidate Forum, the virtual 2020 version. This event is sponsored by the Decorah chapter of the American Association of University Women, the Luther College Political Science Department, the Luther College Social Work Program, and the Luther College Center for Ethics and Public Engagement. So thank you to those sponsors, and a big thank you to Professors Jackie Wilkie, Susan Schmidt, and to all of Professor Schmidt's students who helped produce this video in the Social Work 201 class. Iowa representatives to the House of Representatives serve 2-year terms. They represent constituent interests in Des Moines and focus on state level issues. And candidates for Iowa House of Representative District 55 are Michael Bergen and Kayla Cater. Here is a map with the Iowa House districts. Iowa House District 55 is again in the top right corner, almost all the way to the right of the map.
Well, good afternoon. I'm Michael Bergen. I'm State Representative for House District 55, and I'm a candidate for re-election. I ask for your consideration and vote in the upcoming November 3rd general election. I'm a lifelong resident of Winship County, having graduated Decorah High School and Luther College, receiving degrees in accounting and economics. I live in rural Dorchester, north of Decorah, with my wife. We have 2 grown daughters, and our older daughter is married with two children in the Decorah School District. I've worked as an accountant and income tax preparer for over 35 years. I've served 2 terms as Winship County Supervisor, and I've coordinated early childhood and child abuse interventions services for 12 years in Howard, Elmwood, Winship, Clayton counties. I've served on many local and state level boards and commissions, and over the years I've gained significant experience and understanding in the areas of education, public health, human services, including Medicaid, child care, child protection, mental health, and developmental disabilities.
My name is Kayla Cater, and I'm running for the Iowa House of Representatives here in District 55. I grew up on a beef farm down by McGregor, and my brothers and I were the 5th generation on that farm. So we had the good luck to be raised next door to my grandparents, to work outside alongside my dad, and to sit under the shade of trees that my great-great-grandfather, an Irish immigrant, planted. When my brothers graduated from high school and left the farm, I kind of got to be Dad's right-hand man. So I spent a lot of time fixing fence and moving cattle, taking care of livestock, and really loved it and knew that I wanted to be involved in agriculture and stay in Northeast Iowa. But when I graduated as the co-valedictorian of my high school class, I heard the same message that a lot of rural kids hear loud and clear. And that is, to be successful, you should go away to school, get a job in a big urban area, and not come back to Northeast Iowa, and certainly not come back to be involved in farming. Now, I was deeply troubled by that, and instead of just accepting it as conventional wisdom, I decided instead to try to chart a different course. So I studied international agriculture and rural development when I went to college to better understand how we can revitalize rural areas and create opportunities here for us to stay. And I made a very conscientious decision to come back to Northeast Iowa when I graduated. First, as an AmeriCorps service member in Clayton County Schools, helping kids learn how to grow food and where food comes from. And then helping start the farm energy program at the Winneshiek Energy District, where I help farmers keep money in their pockets and in our communities by installing energy efficiency and renewable energy on their farms. And now with Iowa State Extension and Outreach, I work with beginning farmers, with small food businesses, with folks that are trying to find ways to innovate in agriculture and keep small businesses here in our rural communities. So I really get to see the opportunities that we have to bring people to Northeast Iowa where they want to be because of our stunning landscape, because of the tight-knit nature of our communities, because this is a place that they grew up in and love and care about. But I think that the state has been far too focused on, basically giving tax breaks to wealthy folks and corporations in our urban areas of the state, and have not been taking an agenda that really looks at rural communities and our way of life here and prioritizes us. So my goal as a representative is to rebuild our rural agricultural economy, revitalize our main streets, bring the next generation back here to do it. And I know that if we take a strong agenda to the state house, we can build that together. Unfortunately, the coronavirus pandemic is making things harder here in rural Iowa, and so we have a lot of work to do at the state house. And we have to make sure that we shore up and support our rural healthcare system, which has been struggling during this pandemic and before. We need to make sure that we're funding our schools so that they have the resources they need during the pandemic, and to make sure that they're not facing further consolidation in our rural areas. And then we need to try to prioritize specifically the rural entrepreneurs, the startups, the folks who are going to transition farms to the next generation, and give them a leg up so that we can keep people in our landscape and really make our area vibrant. So that's what I'm passionate about. That's why I'm running for the Iowa House of Representatives, and I hope I can earn your vote this November. Thank you.
What are the most pressing pandemic-related health issues, and what will you do about them?
When it comes to the most pressing issues with the COVID pandemic we're facing, I think at the state level, we're seeing a few things. So first of all, we have to make sure that the data we're using to track our cases and our positives is accurate and correct. And we have to make sure that we're getting plenty of testing out there so that we can really see where threats are by the zip code level in real time, and make sure that Iowans are making good decisions based on real information. I think that we also really need to make sure, in addition to having, good access to testing and rapid testing, that our schools and our institutions have what they need, have the resources they need to make sure that they can take all the measures. So, whether that's PPE for our school districts, or in our healthcare facilities, or even extra resources so that we can keep class sizes smaller and pod sizes smaller. There's just a lot that we need to do to really ensure that everyone is able to stay safe, and we have to bring those resources to bear. And I will also say that I've talked to a number of small businesses who thought that they weren't qualified for the PPP loan at the federal level, and therefore didn't benefit from that program or haven't yet. And so I know that we have a lot of work to do as well to keep some of our small Main Street businesses going through the crisis, and to make sure that we're there to support them, both as we try to manage the rest of this pandemic and recover from the recession and the fallout of it. So there's a lot that we need to work on there.
I think the recent response to COVID-19 has highlighted the importance of our local hospitals and our medical communities. We've been responsive in the legislature, working with telehealth legislation, emergency medical services, and meeting Medicaid commitments. I specifically worked with our local hospital, helping them and 42 other rural municipal hospitals to access federal bailout loans in response to COVID-19. Our statute prohibits municipal hospitals from borrowing funds. And so I've worked with our Winship Medical Center to make the case to Governor Reynolds to waive that legal requirement with our emergency proclamations. I then worked to amend the law for this current year as we passed our budget, and then we'll review that in our coming year to see if it would be appropriate to make a long-term policy change. I think overall, Iowa's made a transition in managed care of our Medicaid system. Our old system was antiquated and out of date and inefficient. And while the change over presented its own challenges, we've been effective with the new managed care system in being able to focus on many of the social determinants of health, improving the longevity and quality of life of the clients that are served. And 1 out of 5 Iowans are served by our Medicaid system. I'm going to continue to work with are in support of community hospitals and emergency medical services, and funding for mental health and addiction treatment. I've had experience in serving areas on boards and commissions with nursing homes, and understand the demands for care of our senior population. 50% of our nursing home residents are impoverished and rely on Medicaid to fund the cost of their stay. So I'm going to work to increase the funding in nursing homes, which in turn will help support healthcare workers in their earnings and livelihood. And I hope to continue to support projects with Iowa Department of Aging on helping people age in their own homes, bringing care to them in their preferred care setting. I think I've been pleased with the federal funds as they've come to be implemented to help with the nursing care industry in particular and help with their workforce needs. And I think that there will be continued work in that area. And then we'll continue to work on adverse childhood experience and understanding the impact of trauma and the negative impact of the life and on life and the health of children and adults when that's ignored. I'm hoping to build resilience and recovery in mental health and addiction.
What are the most pressing economic security issues, and what specific action will you take to address them?
Overall, Iowa's got a strong economy that's in recovery from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. I think if we continue to address some of the needs of our economy, and that's developing Iowa's workforce shortage and developing a workforce of skilled workers. We just have a high demand and unfulfilled capacity for skilled workforce. And we'll need to take a multi-pronged approach to address that. And we've made a good start on that already. First is investing into our workforce by expanding worker training programs and investing into our community colleges. We've enacted Future Ready Iowa to allow for internships, apprenticeships, and employee training and adult retraining in the areas of the high skilled force that have a strong return for the earnings for employees. And we've recently funded the Last Dollar Scholarship program in community colleges to help overcome some of the barriers of the cost of college education and reduce student debt. A second area is to find ways to improve childcare, making it affordable and accessible to families. I've spent decades working with childcare, ensuring that we have quality childcare. In the House, we passed 4 measures during our last session. They did not pass through the Senate, so they'll be coming up and we'll review that again. The federal CARES funding from COVID-19 relief has been used to help supplement some of the income for our child care homes and centers as they went through a disruption with the COVID-19. There will still be a need for child care for our essential workers as we move forward and through the startup of schools this fall. And as I've gone through that disruption, so I'll continue to support child care resource referrals and child care nurse consultants to support our child care providers in offering appropriate care needs as well as a safe educational environment. We also need to focus on the expansion of rural access to broadband internet. And so we'll work through that. We currently have benefiting from the federal grants. We're able to devote to that, but we do have existing ongoing supports for the CARES Act, for the expansion of broadband.
When I think about the economy, I think about the reason I got into this race, which is to revitalize rural Iowa and to bring the next generation back both to our farms and to our main streets. And so I think, hopefully we'll talk more about education and about healthcare and some of those systems, which are a big piece of what keeps our rural economies going, and something that we have to attract the next generation. But what we really need to do is make sure that we're creating the infrastructure and the incentives to help people stay in and move to rural communities. So for me, that includes taking a look at the giant tax credits and corporate giveaways that go mainly to 8 counties in Iowa and don't really don't have positive impacts on rural Iowans, and instead looking at how we can incentivize people that are going to stay and come to our small towns and, build businesses for the long haul here. That includes, making sure they have access to capital, making sure they have access to technical assistance and resources to chart a strong business. And it also means helping the next generation of farmers transition family farms and existing farms, because we're going to see a huge transfer of land over the next couple of decades. And we really need to make sure that we're keeping people in our landscape and that they are, farming successfully and contributing to the fabric of our rural communities.
What education issues will you address if elected?
In terms of education funding in our state at every level, it's been underfunded for a decade. And, when I was growing up here and going through our public school system, we were #1 in the nation, and we were really proud of that Iowa ranked so high in education. But we've seen over, the past decade that not only have we been underfunding the schools, but they haven't even kept up with the rate of inflation. So I see, that leading to consolidation in our rural areas, and that is certainly an access issue for students here. I see that leading to tuition hikes at our colleges and universities and community colleges. And when that happens, we're talking about impacts that have ripples across our communities. First of all, when we underfund schools, then we start getting schools consolidating, and pretty soon we're putting kids on the bus for 45 minutes to get to school and get back. And that's a real hardship for our children. But it also means that once you start to lose a school in any given town, you are less able to attract young families there, less able to make this argument that people can stay and have a high quality of life in rural Iowa. So I see funding for our K-12 schools as just the bedrock and the lifeblood of keeping our rural communities going. And we have to both commit to fully funding it and then also prioritize when that funding gets set in the legislative session so that it's early on and that schools have that security to plan for the following year with their budget. When you think about tuition at universities and colleges and community colleges, we have also seen that underfunding has put more of the burden on students to cover the cost of their education than the state. And that ratio has really changed since the 1970s in Iowa, where colleges, the state used to be supporting colleges to the extent that about 70% of the funds were from the state and about 30% was covered by the student. And that has now inverted. I think that by putting that burden more on students, we are making it harder for our rural kids to access education. And we're making it harder for people to retrain and go to our community colleges and seek better paying jobs here in rural Iowa. So when we have less access to education at that level too, not only are we hurting individuals in our communities, but again, we're shrinking our rural economy and making those opportunities less accessible for people, making the opportunity to bring good paying jobs in less possible.
Well, we'll continue to work on a world-class education system for our K-12 students. I'll continue to be a strong proponent and advocate for our early childhood students, promote some of the proven programs that assist in early childhood development with in-home parent education supports, quality childcare, and quality preschool learning. It's important that we focus on the 0 to 8-year-olds as they learn to read, to help them make the transition to read to learn through the lifelong learning aspects. I've served on a number of boards and commissions in the areas of early childhood Iowa. I was Early Access Council, State Child Care Advisory Committee. And they've given me a strong understanding before coming to the legislature about the impact and overlap of public health, human services, and education as they focus on those early childhood. In our K-12 schools, we've added over $1 billion of funding in the last 10 years. We're at an all-time high for funding. We've made changes over the last 3 years to make sure that we're accessing transportation dollars, offsetting the cost in the rural districts of those getting kids to and from school. And so we're reimbursing half of those costs. One of my districts had a cost of $1,000 per child. So when the state was spending $6,000 to school, they were using $1,000 just to get the child to and from school. We've given them an extra $500 per child that they're using the classroom for classroom supplies, teacher and staff expenses. And then we've extended the local sales tax, or the 1 cent sales tax, SAVE funding to help them with the improved infrastructure, safety and security upgrades, and classroom technology.
What specific issues of racial injustice, specifically within law enforcement, will you prioritize? I've
worked actually several years with law enforcement. In my role with Iowa Communities Assurance Pool, we work with a number of counties and cities in providing liability and property protection. And so over the past 3 years in particular, since the Ferguson incidents in St. Louis area, we've been working with at least 80 police and sheriff departments in reviewing their policies and practices and making sure that they're addressing a variety of needs with officer training and providing those trainings. So in the legislature, we took a specific action at the end of session that really demonstrated the bipartisan work that we do in Des Moines, that when we can come together and address the things that we need concerning areas of civil rights that affect our law enforcement. I think it's important to recognize in Iowa that we've got a long history of leadership in civil rights. We have established practices to address discrimination, regardless of race, sex, age, or other issues with our Iowa Civil Rights Commission. And they have a process in place to address those concerns. We also have local areas that have established the Civil Rights Commission. Even here in Decorah, they have their own Civil Rights Commissions. And so I think it's important that we oversee that. In my work working with children, I've been involved in aspects of disproportionate and minority contact when looking at juvenile offenders, and partnering with judiciary in the process on how kids, youth are disproportionately representative by race come into the court system, and then work backwards through police departments and then community structures to help alleviate that. And I really believe that it's going to take action with local community leaders, local governments, to make the changes to address that overall. But certainly we can sort of provide some overall policy guidance and support at a state level.
When they passed the More Perfect Union Plan. And I think that shows that Iowa has the will to make sure that people are not experiencing discrimination, and that we are trying to strive for our ideals of, creating real equality here in the state. That legislation made a ban on chokeholds. And it also meant that, if an officer of the law is fired from one department for excessive use of force, then they can't be rehired somewhere else. So it does ensure that, officers are incentivized to do the right thing, and that there's accountability in the system for that. I think that when we look at racism and how deeply it's embedded in our systems, we really have to look at, not just our criminal statutes, but also the way our state spends money. And for a long time, the state has had minority impact statements that will help legislators understand how when a criminal statute gets changed, how that might affect different people, whether that will disproportionately affect people of color or women or the disability community, et cetera. And having that sort of data, I think, allows legislators to make decisions that really show how communities can be impacted and be prepared with that knowledge to make good decisions so that we are still making sure that we're free from discrimination. I think we can apply that same type of minority impact statement to some of our budgeting process in the state and really look at, when we're spending money, to see that we are not having inequality in the way that money is affecting our communities, and whether that's affecting people based on gender, women or men, people of color versus Caucasian, or even thinking about zip codes and whether rural students are being impacted by school funding or urban districts are being impacted by that. So I think really being able to look at those minority impact statements and making sure that no matter where you live in Iowa, no matter your gender or whether you're a person of color, that we are living up to the equality, the value of equality, and that we are free from discrimination.
Why are you the right person for this job?
I decided to run for office because I have seen some of the pressure to leave rural Iowa firsthand. And for me, sort of being told after growing up on my family farm and really loving our rural communities that basically my opportunities would be to go away to a city and not come back. That was really troubling. And so I've spent, my career essentially turning that on its head and challenging that idea that people should leave rural America and trying to figure out instead, how do we keep people in rural Iowa? How do we revitalize our small towns? And that is the motivation and the passion that drew me into this work. And so when I say that I'm running to revitalize our rural farm economy, rebuild our main streets, and bring the next generation back home to do it, it's not just a phrase. It's been my life. I think the way that I approach that work is also different. And it's based in really letting people locally find solutions together and do that work at the grassroots so that these policies and these ideas are truly coming from the people that are going to benefit from them. And we've done that in the campaign by holding gatherings and really bringing people into community discussions. People of all parties participated. And not only will we do that for the rest of the campaign by listening to people on the phones and in any way that they want to talk to us, but I want to do that when I'm a representative. And I think there's just nothing more important than really engaging people in the issues that impact our daily lives so that folks have a voice and a say in what's really happening. I look forward to legislating that way. I look forward to building on these relationships that we've created in the campaign and making sure that people know I am accessible and that there's nothing I want more than for them to be every bit as engaged in this process as I am.
Overall, I bring broad experience, several years working with some of the primary areas of concern, with health, with human services, and that experience is invaluable. I'm motivated by civic duty, both with serving locally, serving and working with local groups over the years, serving on a number of boards and commissions, being involved in my church. And I value the experience that I had in my previous work as a county supervisor, my fiscal, economic training in accounting have all been helpful. And every day I'm thankful for the past experiences I have that have given me the foundation to help make decisions. I believe it's important as a representative that as we look at these complex issues that we're facing, that we're able to look at it, the many facets and perspectives that are offered, and then work with the peers, even if it's coming up through a process of compromise, to address these issues. For over 20 years of involvement from a county supervisor level on up through current work of working with the judiciary and looking at the process for commitments, both for mental health and addiction needs, and making sure that our laws are current and respect individual rights. Trust, integrity, perseverance, are all essential traits to be successful in working with the peers in Iowa House. And I ask for your support in sending me back to Des Moines to continue my work.